I can see that lots of times it really does. I could think of all sorts of instances of suffering in my past that seems to have built my character a lot. Where my parents decided not to spoil me when I was younger. My parents decided that I needed to work hard and earn something in order for me to truly get that reward. It seems like that past struggle, that past effort, that past suffering is really central to all those good, strong parts of my character today. The fact that I have any amount of strength, any amount of conviction, any amount of moral clarity, seems in part due to the past struggles that I've had. Now, there is a bit of a worry that not all suffering seems to build souls. In fact, some suffering seems to do the exact opposite of building souls. There's some people who experience suffering at exactly the wrong moment, so that it almost renders them incapable of doing anything but destroying themselves. Think about somebody who struggled long and hard with a drug addiction and has just really tried throughout all her life to sober up and to get clean. And there's this one final time where it seems like she's just ready to finally be clean, and she's been clean for 2 or 3 months. And then something tragic happens, unrelated to her struggle with drug addiction. Like, let's say her best friend dies tragically in a freak car accident or something like that. And that awful amount of suffering happens at just the wrong time for this woman struggling with drug addiction, so that she spirals back and winds up destroying herself in her final last drug addiction that ultimately, her final relapse that ultimately kills herself. These sorts of instances of suffering are not terribly uncommon. These sorts of things do seem to happen all the time. So one thing just to be on the lookout is that while suffering does, in fact, build a lot of character, it can also be a very, very powerfully negative thing as well. The old motto, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, one, might not be true, and two, really depends on the whatever doesn't kill you part. Lots of suffering does ultimately wind up killing you. All right, let's move on to the second question in evaluating the soul-building response. Is it worth it? Is learning this lesson on our own, independently, worth all the resulting suffering, or all the suffering that needs to accompany learning this lesson? Well, I really do agree that morality is very important. Probably one of the most, if not the most important lesson we can learn here while we're humans on Earth. But how important is learning this lesson on our own, independently? How important is it for us to figure this out on our own? Couldn't God just create us morally perfect like angels? What would be so bad with creating us already morally perfect? Or how about we're not created morally perfect, but we're sat down and taught by God, the perfect teacher we would presume, at a certain point in our life when we're young enough, but also old and smart enough to be able to be taught and understand this and truly grasp God's lesson for us. What would be wrong with being taught that way? Wouldn't that be okay? How important is it that we have to figure this out for ourselves? How important is it that we do good things because we've freely chosen to do those good things, and that our good actions are, quote, built upon through personal histories of moral effort, as John Hick writes on page 375 of our textbook? How important is that morality? How important is it that morality is earned in some sense? How valuable is that? Well, that's not asking how important morality itself is. That's asking a question about how we got morality. And that's a separate question. So it's not entirely obvious that earning morality is very valuable. Even if you say morality itself, doing good, learning good from evil is important. The specific method that you become moral might not be as important. Something worth considering anyway. Another question that I have on the is it worth it front. How important is morality once you start changing the rules of the world you live in? And I don't mean changing the moral rules, I mean changing the physical rules, the physical laws that govern the world. Morality is incredibly valuable in a world like ours where actions have consequences. Actions have both positive and negative consequences, both on the person making the action and on others surrounding that action. So, what if there were a world without any suffering whatsoever? Would morality make any sense? Would morality be important at all? Well, in a world without suffering, here's the sorts of things I could do. I could take a gun and literally shoot people. And if this was a world without suffering, they could get shot multiple times and just laugh about it, not experience any pain, discomfort, not die as a result of this. They would just laugh and say, haha, do it again. It would be like a Looney Tunes cartoon where Bugs Bunny can shoot Elmer Fudd in the face, and all that results in it is, little black soot on Elmer Fudd's face. And you just get to laugh it off, shake it off, and keep going without them. In a world like that, how important is morality? How important is controlling your behavior, trying to figure out how you should behave? In a world where there's no negative consequences to your actions, controlling your actions doesn't seem to be important at all. Seems like you can and could do literally anything. Would there be any value to morality in that world? Maybe morality is only contingently important upon the specific world that we're living in already. So that there's nothing intrinsically valuable about morality in and of itself. Another way of getting at this, though, maybe God just values self-improvement. Maybe God is, a self-help book author that really thinks there's something invaluable about starting as an imperfect creature or being and slowly transforming yourself on your own into a better and better and ultimately perfect creation. Well, is self-improvement that important? Why start bad and get better if you could just start better? What is the value of self-improvement? Is there some intrinsic value to resisting temptation, to struggling against your natural way of things, to follow rules set upon by someone else? Is there some intrinsic value to improvement in general? I think there might be, maybe, but it's worth considering and definitely worth trying to put up an argument for. All right, let's turn to our last question in our soul-building response. Is it necessary? Is it impossible to become a child of God, to become a morally perfect being in a world with less suffering than the world we happen to live in now? Well, the answer seems to be probably not. At least that's the answer that the book gives when it discusses criticisms of Hick's soul-building response. Now, it's definitely true that the story requires us to experience some suffering, right? We have to be in a world where we experience some pain and we experience some pleasure. But why does this world have all the suffering that it has? Why does it have so much suffering? Think about all the incidences of cancer that occur just among humans, not among animals, but that's also something to consider. What if all the incidences of cancer were cut in half? Half the people who currently get cancer wound up getting cancer. Wouldn't that be enough suffering for you to learn this lesson? How about instead of all the natural disasters that happen, only 3/4 of the natural disasters happen? Would you be able to learn the lesson of morality in a world where the Haiti earthquake didn't happen, but all the other natural disasters happened? Is all this suffering absolutely necessary to build each and every one of our souls?